Hello everyone, welcome back to this channel, and in this video we will be taking a look at what global registration is, and we will be working with global registration methods. This tutorial or this video is part of a tutorial series that aims to explore using Open3D to process point cloud data. In our previous video, we touched on the main differences between global and local registration. During the registration process of 2-point clouds, where we're trying to match 2-point clouds of a lidar sensor that's traveling in a room and taking multiple scans or snippets, or let's say, snippets of the environment around it, and it's trying to stitch it together. We talked about how there are two types of registration methods, the global and local registration. During the registration process of these 2-point clouds, common algorithms such as the iterative closest point do not converge to a global error minimum. And what that essentially means is that they do not give us the minimum error possible when we're trying to match these 2-point clouds together. They might converge to a local minimum, in contrast to global minimum methods that help us and aid us to reach that global minimum space for that, so that when we use further upon that the local registration methods, we can reach a more approximate alignment. And global registration methods do not depend on alignment for initialization. Unlike the local registration algorithms, typically they produce less precise alignments, but can aid in converging to the global minimum, and hence are employed as the initial step for local methods. In this video, we will be looking at global registration. What is it, and how can we find the initial transformation required to process or to further align in a more approximate manner these 2-point clouds using local registration methods such as the iterative closest point. So without further ado, let us jump to the code and start coding. So first things first, we need to connect to our notebook and of course install Open3D, as we are starting with a new session without Open3D installed, and we're going to need to import the libraries. In this video, we will be using the same dataset that we used in our local registration video, where we will be importing the demo ICP point cloud source point cloud and target point cloud using the same code that we used in our previous video. And we will be also using the same helper function that is documented in Open3D to visualize the transformed source point clouds together with the target point cloud. And before we resume, let's take a look at how global registration will generally register the source and target point clouds using a global registration algorithm. So how will that even work? Let's understand the intuition behind this so that we can get to pre-processing the point clouds and registering the point clouds in a global sense to produce an initial transformation to be further, let's say, registered using a local registration. So let's take a look at that first. To understand how global registration is trying to register or stitch two different point clouds at different poses into the correct global minimum space, we would need to understand what a pose is in the context of point cloud data. A pose typically refers to the position and orientation of an object in 3D space. And this is often represented by a combination of translation, which is simply 3D coordinates, and rotation, which are the 3 angles, forming a 6 degrees of freedom pose. And to stitch those two different point clouds together to reach the correct global minimum space, we need to find pose invariant features, meaning we need to find features that are invariant to that pose, as they will assist in matching those points together that have matching features but different poses and orientations, because when we think about global registration and what it's trying to do, we're looking at the same environment at different angles, at different poses. So how can we stitch them without taking the location or pose or orientation or the position of that object into consideration? We would need to find specific features that can help us uh, without taking into consideration their positions, because we're looking at it from different angles. And then from that features, realize or stitch together those two point clouds of the same object at different angles. And so that's exactly what we will be doing here. Pose invariant features are features that are invariant and independent of the pose and the orientation of that object in that 3D space. And in this tutorial, we will be looking at the fast point feature histogram algorithm as a way for us to extract those pose invariant features. And what is fast point feature histograms, or FPFH? So FPFH essentially looks at the point and its neighbors, and it calculates a histogram. And this histogram is just a chart that shows the frequency of different values. And what are those values? It's a histogram based on the angles of these points, how close they are. And these histograms serve as a fingerprint that captures the local geometry. And when I say local geometry, meaning the surface of the shape, the feature of the shape of the object, but not necessarily its pose, right? We're not talking about its orientation, we're not talking about its position in this environment. We're talking about how the object looks like, its geometry locally. And then this histogram will serve as a fingerprint around each point that will be used when trying to find the matches of the same point in the target point cloud. So then from that features for each point, we're calculating this histogram, which is a fingerprint, so that when we try to match these to this point in the source cloud with its corresponding point in the target point cloud, we will use these histograms as fingerprints, as clues to match them up in a manner that brings us closer to the global minimum error. Now that we've understood generally why we would need the FPFH algorithm to find fingerprints that can assist us in matching up these point clouds, let's look at the function that we'll be using to pre-process the point clouds and find those features that will help us in searching for the corresponding points in the target point cloud. So Open3D has created a pre-processing function called preprocess_point_cloud, and it does the following. So first and foremost, it downsamples the point cloud using voxel downsampling, and you can refer to our pre-processing video to learn more about voxel downsampling. So it first downsamples the input point cloud using a specified voxel size, which we will be specifying when we define the arguments and call this function, to reduce the number of points in the point cloud so that we can help speed up the process of finding the FPFH features of each point clouds, because we're going to calculate the FPFH, which is essentially the fingerprints of all the point clouds in the source and target point clouds, and that could be really too much to handle, right? So we would like to first of all downsample those point clouds, and voxel downsampling is great for that. Then we will be estimating the normals of each point. Why normals? Because the main reason we estimate the normals, because it gives us so much information about this point in space. When we calculate the FPFH algorithm, it is important that we, give it the point information about the point itself and its normal, surface normal. And surface normals are great for things like, measuring the curvature of a certain object in space. And we've already talked about this and touched upon this in the pre-processing video if you'd like to refer back to that. And here, the normals will be estimated using a KD tree search with a search radius of twice the voxel size. And we've set the maximum nearest neighbors to 30. And finally, we will be applying the FPFH feature with the search radius of 3 or 5 times, the voxel size, and maximum nearest neighbor of 100. And basically, this function will return the downsampled point cloud and the FPFH, which is the fingerprints of all the points of the downsampled point cloud. So let's look at what we have so far and visualize initially within an initial transformation that is completely random the source and target point clouds. So this is exactly what I've done here. I've went ahead and created a random NumPy array with random transformation, used it as an initial transformation to transform the target and source point clouds together. And then we will draw this initial transformation, and this is exactly what we get. And then I will be passing the source point cloud and the target point cloud to the preprocess point cloud function that we discussed earlier, where we are going to voxel downsample the point clouds and estimate the normals required to estimate the fingerprints or the FPF features of each point in this point cloud that we've downsampled. Okay, and we will of course get a downsampled point cloud and the fingerprints of each point in the point clouds, or the features, okay, that we will be requiring to search up to then look up the corresponding points in the source and target point clouds. And let's see how good of a job the global registration will do with the help of the features that we've calculated for both the source and target point clouds. In this tutorial, we will be calculating the global registration transformation through using the help of RANSAC, or Random Sample Consensus, which is essentially an effective algorithm for dealing with outliers in data. And it works by randomly selecting a subset of data points that we will be specifying in our code, and then trying to find a model that accurately fits the most points that it can fit, as you can see from the GIF. This process is repeated multiple times, and the model with the highest score that fits the most points is selected. The selected model will be based on how many inliers it can accommodate, while the rest and how less of outliers it can produce. This method is very useful in tasks like estimating camera motion and visual odometry, and of course it's useful in global registration. And here in RANSAC, we will be in each iteration defining random points, picking them from the source point cloud, and trying to find their matching corresponding points, in the target point cloud, through searching up their nearest neighbor in the FPFH feature space or fingerprints that we've acquired in the pre-processing function previously. So since the FPFH that we've calculated for both the source and target is a 33-dimensional space, we might need the help of a technique called pruning. And pruning essentially is a technique that is used in machine learning and many other applications to reject and eliminate incorrect matches. And it does that through reducing the size of a trained model by eliminating some of its parameters. The goal of pruning is to create a smaller, faster, and more efficient model while still maintaining its accuracy. In this tutorial, we will be using two pruning techniques, and it's the correspondence checker based on distance, which is right here, and the correspondence checker based on edge length. Now, what does each one do? In the correspondence checker based on length, the algorithm checks if the length of any two edges, which are simply lines formed by two vertices or 2 points, individually drawn from the source and target correspondences, are similar. So it's checking the edge length between 2 points. So why are we checking the edge length? Why edges? Why vertices? Why are we using that type of terminology when we're dealing with points and point clouds? Well, if you remember in the FPFH, what we did is we downsampled the source and target point clouds using voxel downsampling. And if we remember from our preprocessing and from our introductory videos, voxels, let's look at a very simple image like this one. Voxels are basically like this, right? So when we look at voxels, they have vertices and edges. So what we are looking at is, for example, let's say this is a target point cloud and this is a source point cloud. We're looking at two edges, one at the source point cloud and the other in the target point cloud, and we're trying to figure out whether the length of these edges are about 0.9 of each other. Okay, so that's exactly what we're doing here. And the second pruning technique or method that we'll be using is the correspondence checker based on distance. So this algorithm checks if the aligned point clouds are close, the distance between them is less than a specified threshold, which we calculated here based on the voxel size that we specified in the code above. Now, points that pass the pruning will be subjected to RANSAC. And we can see that we will be using the registration method and specifically the registration using RANSAC based on feature matching, since we're using the FPFH, which is a feature matching algorithm that's, as we said, trying to find fingerprints. So only things that pass the pruning will be subject to RANSAC, and to make sure that RANSAC is converging to a global error, we will need to define two convergence criteria, which are simply the RANSAC iterations and the confidence probability. And of course, the larger those numbers, the more accurate the result is, but the longer this will take. So let's define this function that has the pruning, that has the registration, and let's call it, okay, pass the downsampled source point cloud that we've calculated using the preprocessed point cloud function above, the downsampled target point cloud, and both FPFH of both the source and target, as well as the voxel size that we've specified above. And let's print the results and see what happens. We can see that there's a huge difference when we go back to this point cloud, which has an initial transformation that's totally random. We can see that there's a huge mismatch. Things are so misaligned. And by just using the FPFH as the search criteria for RANSAC, we can see that they're approximately fully aligned. They're basically on top of each other, and we can see that one point cloud has taken a picture from a certain angle and the other another angle, and they're both very much closely aligned. Now, what if we wanted to continue using local registration? As we've mentioned, to continue, we need to take this initial transformation that we just calculated using RANSAC and use it as the initial transformation for any local registration method that you'd like to use. So how do we do that? A minor modification can be done to the function to just print the result of the transformation over here. So this is the only addition. So we're just taking the result of this whole transformation, and then we're just calling the transformation method to print out that array. Okay, to print that the array. So let's run that. Let's run this function modified and rerun this code. What I mean by rerun this code, we recall that code. So we can see that same results we're getting, but we just printed out the initial transformation that we can pass down to the initial, we can pass down as initial transformation for any local registration method to fine tune that matching of point clouds or registering of those point clouds. Now, what we also see as part of the results is that we are getting a high fitness score and a low RMSE error. And of course, if you applied local registration methods like ICP, point to point or point to plane, you'll get a more refined registration of those 2 point clouds. Thank you for watching this video and stay tuned for more. This tutorial series is all documented on Medium, and you will find the links for the code and the Medium article it's based on in the description below.